Good evening, and welcome to the Sleepy Geographer. Tonight's journey is all about the extremes of our world. The hottest deserts, the coldest villages, the wettest mountainsides, and the driest valleys where rain has forgotten to fall. These are the edges of Earth, where nature tests its own limits, and where life somehow finds a way to endure. Before we set off, I would love to know where you're listening from. It is always fascinating to see the range of places these journeys reach. If you enjoy winding down with these explorations, a gentle like and a quiet subscribe would mean a lot. To those who are already subscribed, thank you kindly for supporting these calm travels around the globe. Now, I do hope this video isn't so interesting that it keeps you wide awake. Though if it does, perhaps the small consolation is that you will drift off a little wiser than before. So let us begin. If the Earth can be calm and quiet in some places, why does it roar, freeze, scorch and flood in others? When we talk about extremes, we're not simply talking about numbers on a thermometer or records in a book. We're talking about the very outer edges of what our planet can do. The limits set by physics, by climate, by geography itself. These are the places where the rules of daily life bend and sometimes break, and where survival requires invention, patience, or simple endurance. An extreme can mean searing heat that pushes air temperatures beyond what we thought possible, or cold so deep that breath freezes as it leaves your lips. It can mean rain that falls in endless sheets for weeks, or landscapes where water has not touched the ground for centuries. It can mean living high above the clouds where the air is too thin to breathe comfortably, or far below the surface of the sea where sunlight never arrives. Extremes also remind us that Earth is restless. Mountains rise to dizzying heights, trenches sink into dark abysses, and winds race across ice fields with unstoppable force. And still, life persists, moss clinging to desert rocks, fish glowing in pitch-black waters, or entire communities building homes in places most would never dare to linger. There is something quietly humbling about this. Extremes show us both the fragility and the resilience of life, the delicate balance that allows it to exist at all. And as we move from one extreme to the next, we are really tracing the boundaries of possibility, seeing just how wide the canvas of our planet can stretch. So tonight we will follow the edges, the blazing deserts, the frozen tundra, the rain-soaked valleys, and the silent, sunless seas. Each one tells a story not just of geography, but of endurance, adaptation, and awe. The journey ahead will be long, calm, and full of wonder. But before we begin with the first chapter, ask yourself this. If you had to choose, would you rather live in endless heat, endless cold, endless rain, or in a place where nothing ever changes at all? In the heart of Iran lies the Dasht Ilut, a desert so harsh and unyielding it has earned the title of the hottest place on Earth. Satellite readings taken here have shown ground temperatures soaring beyond 70 degrees Celsius, a number so astonishing that it outpaces many ovens. Though to be fair, ovens at least provide snacks, while the Lut offers nothing more than salt, rock and searing air. The Lut stretches over more than 50,000 square kilometres, making it vast enough to swallow entire countries. Its very name translates to emptiness, and when you look out across its cracked plains, it is easy to see why. This is not the familiar image of desert sands rolling endlessly under blue skies. Instead, the Lut is a place of strange and alien beauty, shaped by relentless winds and a climate that seems determined to erase all comfort. Yardangs, sharp ridges of stone and sand, line up like serried battalions, their flanks carved by centuries of abrasion. Elsewhere, salt flats sprawl like giant mosaics, their crusts glistening under the glare of the sun. And at the Kaluts, towering formations rise like ancient fortresses, sculpted into jagged forms that make the landscape feel as though it belongs on another planet. The searing heat of the Lut is not a mystery, but the result of geography and physics working together. With virtually no rainfall, the air is stripped of moisture. Clouds rarely gather here, so sunlight falls unfiltered and unrelenting. The ground itself is dark and rocky, with a low albedo, meaning it absorbs most of the sunlight instead of bouncing it back into the sky. With each passing hour of daylight, the surface becomes a storehouse of heat, radiating warmth even after the sun slips below the horizon. Add to this the circulation of hot air trapped above the plateau, and you have a natural furnace where relief is almost impossible to find. Unlike many other deserts, the Lat offers almost no vegetation to soften its extremes. Plants, where they exist, help cool the land by providing shade and releasing moisture into the air. But here there is no such gentle balance. The sun beats down, the ground drinks in the heat, and the thermometer climbs to levels that make the human imagination falter. For all its severity, the Lat is not lifeless. On the microscopic scale, there are organisms that thrive in its soil and salt crusts, using ingenious ways to harvest tiny amounts of water from the air. At night, when the temperature drops, small animals emerge briefly from their burrows, taking advantage of the cooler hours before retreating back underground. Insects skitter across the sand, and rodents forage quickly in the shadows, living lives of constant adaptation. These creatures do not simply endure, they demonstrate the remarkable resilience of life in the face of punishing odds. To scientists, the Lat is more than a desert. It is a glimpse of other worlds, its bizarre formations and unforgiving climate mirror conditions on Mars, making it a natural testing ground for astrobiology. If microbial life can exist in such an oven, then perhaps the boundaries of habitability stretch further than we once believed. The Lat becomes a classroom not just for geologists, but for those who look beyond our planet and wonder where else life might cling on. There is beauty in this harshness. At dawn, the desert glows in shifting shades of orange and crimson, the Ardangs casting long shadows like rows of ancient monuments. At dusk, the Kaluts blaze gold before melting into purple twilight. And when night takes hold, the sky above the Lat becomes an ocean of stars, so clear and bright that it can leave even the most seasoned traveller speechless. In the absence of water, trees, or even people, the desert offers something else. Silence. Not the casual quiet of a city street at night, but a deep, almost physical stillness that seems to stretch across time itself. Those who have stood here speak of that silence as much as they speak of the heat. It presses in, magnified by the emptiness of the land, reminding anyone who dares to cross the desert just how small human life is compared to the vastness of Earth. Yet people are drawn here. Explorers, scientists, and a handful of intrepid visitors return again and again, compelled by the magnetism of extremity, humbled by the desert's refusal to yield. The Lat is more than the hottest place on Earth. It is a reminder that our planet is capable of both cruelty and magnificence in the same breath. It strips life down to its essentials and yet, in doing so, creates a landscape of stark wonder. To stand in the Lat is to meet the raw edge of habitability, a place where the sun reigns supreme, the air scorches, and survival is a quiet triumph. It is a world at the limit, and in its burning silence it shows us just how far Earth can go. In the remote reaches of Siberia lies a small settlement that has become almost legendary for its astonishing cold. This is Oymyakon, a village nestled in the Sakha Republic, where winter temperatures plunge so low that they defy belief. Thermometers have recorded readings below -70 degrees Celsius in the region, and while the village itself does not always hit that mark, it routinely spends long stretches of winter in the range of -50 degrees. To put that in perspective, that is cold enough to freeze exposed skin in seconds and to make metal brittle like glass. It is not simply chilly, it is a cold so deep it seems to seep into the bones of the earth itself. What makes Oymyakon remarkable is not just the severity of its winters, but the fact that people have chosen to make their homes there. Life in such a place requires a set of adaptations that might sound almost absurd to anyone accustomed to milder climates. For instance, cars are rarely left outside without their engines running. If you turn off the ignition overnight, there is a good chance the vehicle will be frozen solid by morning, its oil congealed, its battery drained, and its parts locked together in icy defiance. As a result, it is common to see a line of trucks and cars gently idling for hours, their exhaust plumes hanging in the still air like little ghosts. The cold reaches into every aspect of life. Eyelashes quickly gather tiny icicles from the moisture of breath. Beards turn white within minutes outdoors. Even the act of speaking can produce clouds that drift like smoke. Pipes, if not carefully insulated, burst under the pressure of ice. Indoor plumbing is unreliable. So many residents rely on outhouses, which makes even the most ordinary daily routine a small expedition. School children, bundled in layers that make them resemble tiny padded astronauts, walk through frost so thick it paints the entire world in monochrome. Remarkably, schools only close if the temperature drops below -52 degrees Celsius. Anything warmer than that is, in the eyes of the locals, manageable. The question arises, why would anyone live here at all? The answer lies partly in history and partly in culture. Oymyakon was once a reindeer herding settlement, a resting place for herders whose animals grazed in the surrounding valleys. Over time, it grew into a permanent community. The soil in this part of Siberia is locked in permafrost, making agriculture almost impossible. Instead, the traditional diet has long depended on meat and fish. Frozen horse meat, raw fish slices known locally as stroganina, and reindeer are staples of the table. These foods, rich in protein and fat, provide the kind of energy needed to endure endless weeks of subarctic darkness. The resilience of the people here is remarkable, but it is not a story of grim survival. There is warmth, not only in the fur-lined coats and wood-burning stoves, but in the spirit of the community itself. Residents know that survival in such a place depends on cooperation. Neighbours help each other repair vehicles, share supplies, and lend a hand when the cold proves overwhelming. The long winters create a rhythm of life that emphasises togetherness. In the evenings, families gather indoors heated by stoves, sharing stories and meals while the wind rattles frost against the windows. Outside, the world may be locked in ice, but inside there is laughter and familiarity. The landscape surrounding Oymyakon is both bleak and beautiful. Endless taiga forests of larch trees stretch to the horizon, their branches heavy with frost. The sky, on a clear day, is a pale blue dome, and in the depths of winter the sun barely creeps above the horizon, casting long shadows across the snow. At night, the aurora borealis sometimes paints the heavens in shifting curtains of green and purple. It is a reminder that even the harshest places can be touched by beauty, that extreme environments often carry their own unique rewards. Geographically, the cold here is explained by the village's position in a valley where frigid air settles like water in a bowl. The surrounding mountains block warmer currents, and in winter, the region becomes a trap for icy air masses. Clear skies allow heat to escape into the atmosphere, and with little wind to stir things up, the air simply grows colder and colder. It is a perfect storm of geography and climate conspiring to create conditions unlike anywhere else inhabited by humans. And yet, life continues. Children play outside, their games punctuated by the crunch of boots on frozen snow. People fish by drilling holes in ice thick enough to drive a truck across. Dogs, bred for the cold, run across the snow with ease, their breath forming little clouds as they work. Even commerce continues, with small shops selling goods to the residents, their doorways curtained to keep out the endless draft. The daily hardships are balanced by a sense of identity. To be from Oymyakon is to be part of a rare and hardy group, people who know how to live in conditions most of the world could scarcely imagine. There is a quiet pride in that, a recognition that they are custodians of a way of life that demonstrates just how adaptable humans can be. While outsiders marvel at the thermometer, locals go about their routines with steady calm. For them, the extraordinary has become ordinary. Visitors to Oymyakon often leave with stories that sound almost surreal. Cameras freeze in minutes, making photography a race against the cold. Pens refuse to write, their ink solidified. Eyeglasses crack under the stress of sudden changes in temperature. And yet, for those who endure the sting of the air long enough, the village reveals a charm all its own. In the soft glow of wood smoke rising from chimneys, in the quiet resilience of people going about their lives, there is a story not just of survival, but of belonging. Oymyakon stands as the coldest inhabited place on Earth, but it is not defined only by that fact. It is defined by the people who call it home, by the way they have turned a frozen valley into a living, breathing community. It is a place where diesel engines hum through the night, where eyelashes sparkle with ice crystals, and where warmth is found not only in fire and fur, but in the bonds between neighbours. In the end, it is proof that even in the most merciless cold, life can carve out a space for itself, and in doing so, make the impossible seem almost ordinary. On the frozen continent of Antarctica, where ice stretches as far as the eye can see, the air itself seems to take on a restless personality. Nowhere else on Earth does the wind roar with such persistence and such ferocity. Here, in the land of endless ice, katabatic winds descend from the high interior plateaus with astonishing force, turning an already inhospitable environment into one of the most extreme places imaginable. The term katabatic comes from the Greek word for descending, and it perfectly captures the nature of these winds. Antarctica's vast interior is a high dome-like plateau covered in ice sheets thousands of meters thick. At the top of this dome, the air becomes incredibly cold and dense. Dense air is heavy, and gravity insists that it cannot stay perched at the top forever. Slowly at first, and then with unstoppable momentum, this heavy air begins to spill down the slopes of the ice sheet. Imagine water being poured from a tilted bowl. The same principle is at work, except here the liquid is invisible and frigid, cascading downhill as a relentless current of air. As it descends, the air accelerates, funneled by valleys and slopes until it becomes a powerful gale. In some parts of coastal Antarctica, wind speeds have been measured at over 200 kilometers per hour. That is fast enough to knock a person off their feet and make even walking a dangerous proposition. These winds are not momentary bursts. They can last for days, howling across the landscape with a determination that feels almost alive. The effect on the environment is profound. Snow is scoured away, packed into hard ridges called sastrugi that stretch across the surface like frozen waves. These ridges, sculpted by wind, can be sharp enough to trip an unwary traveller and tough enough to wear down the runners of sleds. They reflect the invisible hand of the air currents, a silent map etched into the ice showing the paths the winds have taken. To move through this landscape is to walk across a record of the atmosphere's restlessness, a frozen diary written in peaks and grooves. Living in such a place requires resilience not only against the cold but against the ceaseless battering of the air. Research stations, scattered along the coast and interior, are built with this in mind. Buildings are often raised on stilts to prevent them from being buried by drifting snow, and their streamlined shapes help reduce the drag of the wind. Doors open inward to prevent sudden gusts from tearing them off their hinges. Even with such precautions, the wind is an ever-present companion, rattling windows, whistling through cracks, and creating a constant background roar that never quite disappears. Life inside these stations can feel like life on another planet. Scientists and staff are often isolated for months at a time, cut off from the outside world by the very conditions they have come to study. The wind becomes a kind of soundtrack to daily life. It howls and moans, rises and falls, sometimes screaming so loudly against the walls that sleep becomes difficult, and then occasionally it stops. The sudden silence can be just as unsettling as the noise. In the absence of the gale, the vast emptiness of Antarctica presses in. The stillness is so complete that even one's own breathing feels loud. Despite the harshness, the winds serve an important role. They help drive the movement of sea ice, influencing ocean currents that ripple outward to affect climates around the globe. They shape the surface of the continent, redistributing snow and sometimes scouring the ground clear of ice entirely. In places where the wind is strongest, the ground is bare rock, creating tiny, wind-swept oases in an otherwise white desert. It is a reminder that even in its violence, nature has purpose, and Antarctica's storms are part of a larger system that connects faraway climates to this frozen heart. For the people who live and work there, the wind becomes something to respect rather than resist. Outdoor work is carefully timed, and protective gear is layered to guard against both the cold and the sand-blasting sting of airborne ice crystals. Walking between buildings may require ropes or markers to avoid being lost in blowing snow, as visibility can vanish in seconds. A simple errand, stepping outside to check equipment, can turn into an expedition when gusts whip up a whiteout. Yet in the midst of all this, daily life continues. Meals are shared, research is conducted, and friendships form in the warmth of common rooms while the wind hammers endlessly outside. There is a strange beauty to these conditions. Watching snow lifted into the air and carried across the horizon creates a shimmering ghost-like effect, as though the entire world has turned to flowing light. The sky takes on hues of deep cobalt or endless grey, and the horizon blurs into the distance in waves of drifting whiteness. From the safety of shelter, the spectacle is mesmerising, an ever-changing dance of motion across an otherwise still landscape. In quieter moments, when the wind subsides, Antarctica reveals another side of itself. The eerie silence is so absolute that it can feel otherworldly. With no trees to rustle, no animals to call, no rivers to murmur, the only sound is the crunch of boots on snow or the faint hum of machinery. For those used to the relentless gales, this silence feels almost louder than the storms, a reminder that beneath all the noise, Antarctica is a continent of vast emptiness. Katabatic winds make Antarctica the windiest place on Earth, but they also make it one of the most fascinating. They are a constant force, reshaping the land, challenging those who live there, and connecting the icy heart of the continent to the rest of the planet. To experience them is to feel the raw power of nature made visible and tangible, a reminder that the air around us is never truly still, but always on the move. In Antarctica, the wind is not a background element. It is the defining character of the land, restless, powerful, and unforgettable. Stretching across northern Chile lies a desert so arid and unyielding that it is often described as the driest place on Earth. This is the Atacama, a vast plateau of salt flats, rocky valleys, and endless sand, where in some regions not a single drop of rain has been recorded for centuries. Imagine a place so dry that even cacti struggle to survive, a place where the very idea of a puddle seems fantastical. If you were to hang your laundry here, it might dry before it even leaves your hands. The Atacama is not small. It runs for nearly 1,000 kilometers along the Pacific coast, hemmed in on one side by the Andes Mountains and on the other by the Chilean Coast Range. This unusual geography is precisely why the desert is so parched. Moisture-laden air from the east is blocked by the towering Andes, while the coastal mountains prevent wet oceanic air from drifting inland. To make matters worse, the cold Humboldt Current flows north along the Pacific, chilling the air above it. Cold air holds less moisture than warm air, so clouds rarely form, and when they do, they often fail to produce rain. The result is a double barrier that seals the Atacama in a near-permanent drought. In certain areas, annual rainfall averages less than 1 millimetre, and weather stations have gone decades without recording measurable precipitation. Some valleys, such as the hyper-arid Kor near Yungay, are so dry that the soil contains almost no organic material. Here, the landscape is baked and bleached, a mix of salt and stone that looks more like a photograph from another planet than a piece of Earth. It is precisely this resemblance that has drawn the attention of space agencies. NASA has long used the Atacama as a stand-in for Mars. Rovers and instruments destined for the Red Planet are tested here, learning to navigate the rocky terrain and to search for traces of life in soil that barely remembers water. Scientists scour the desert for hardy microbes, organisms capable of surviving in conditions so extreme they seem impossible. These tiny life forms are masters of adaptation, clinging to existence in salt crystals, eking out a living in the thinnest films of moisture, and photosynthesizing with a level of efficiency that would make any plant proud. If life can survive in the Atacama, then perhaps it can survive in the dust and cold of Mars as well. Though it may look lifeless at first glance, the Atacama holds its share of surprises. Lichens cling to rocks, their crusty forms eking out nutrients from air and stone. Hardy shrubs and grasses grow in pockets where underground moisture provides a tiny reservoir of life. Some valleys bloom spectacularly after the rare rainfall, transforming for a few brief weeks into carpets of wildflowers. Locals call this phenomenon the Desierto Florido, the flowering desert, and it is nothing short of astonishing. A land that spends years looking utterly barren suddenly bursts into colour, as if the desert has been holding its breath and finally exhales. Human presence in the Atacama stretches back thousands of years. Ancient peoples crossed these lands with caravans of llamas, trading between the coast and the high Andes. Later, the desert became famous for its mineral riches. Saltpeter, once essential for fertilizer and gunpowder, was extracted in enormous quantities during the 19th century. Today, copper and lithium are mined here, the latter becoming increasingly valuable for powering modern batteries. Ghost towns dot the landscape, silent reminders of past booms and busts, their abandoned buildings slowly succumbing to wind and time. For those who live here now, survival depends on ingenuity. Towns like San Pedro de Atacama rely on scarce water supplies drawn from underground aquifers. Agriculture is limited to oases where irrigation is possible, producing crops like corn and quinoa. Llamas and alpacas still graze in the high valleys, continuing traditions that have lasted for centuries. The dryness makes everyday life a challenge, yet people have adapted, just as plants and microbes have, finding ways to carve existence from the margins. The Atacama is also a haven for astronomers. With almost no clouds, minimal humidity, and little light pollution, its skies are among the clearest on the planet. Observatories dot the desert, their giant dishes and telescopes peering into the universe with extraordinary clarity. From here, astronomers study distant galaxies, newborn stars, and the faint afterglow of the Big Bang itself. In an ironic twist, one of the most lifeless places on Earth offers one of the best windows into the cosmos, reminding us that even emptiness has its uses. The landscapes themselves are works of art shaped by geology and wind. Valleys of salt and stone shimmer in the heat. The Valle de la Luna, or Valley of the Moon, looks like something conjured from science fiction, with jagged ridges and white crusts that mimic lunar terrain. The salt flats of Salar de Atacama stretch into the distance, their surfaces cracked into hexagonal tiles that glint under the sun. Flamingos gather at the salty lagoons, feeding on algae and adding an unexpected splash of life and colour against the stark backdrop. For visitors, the Atacama is a place of awe rather than comfort. The air is so dry that lips crack and skin seems to parch instantly. Walking across its valleys feels like stepping into an oven, the heat radiating not only from above but from the ground beneath your feet. And yet, in the midst of such severity, there is a peace that is hard to find elsewhere. The silence of the desert is immense, a silence that seems to stretch to the horizon. Even the wind, when it comes, whispers more than howls, moving grains of sand in slow, deliberate swirls. It is easy to see why the Atacama has fascinated poets, scientists, and travellers alike. It is a reminder that life does not need abundance to be meaningful, that beauty can be found even in scarcity. In its harshness, the desert shows us the limits of endurance, and in its rare blooms it offers a glimpse of wonder. So the driest desert in the world is not simply a place of emptiness. It is a landscape of extremes, where rain is an event of legend, where scientists test the possibilities of other worlds, and where life survives in forms both fragile and astonishing. The Atacama is Earth at its barest, stripped of frills and comforts, yet in that starkness lies its power. It is a place where the air itself seems to forget moisture, and where survival is a triumph against all odds. A land where even your laundry would be dry before you finish hanging it. High in the hills of northeastern India lies a village where rain is not just a passing visitor, but an almost constant companion. This is Mawsynram, a small settlement perched in the Khasi hills of Meghalaya, known far and wide as the wettest inhabited place on Earth. Here, the skies open with such frequency and intensity that annual rainfall averages nearly 12 metres. To picture that, imagine stacking 7 tall adults one on top of another. That is how much water pours down each year. The reason for this astonishing downpour lies in geography. Moisture-laden winds from the Bay of Bengal sweep northward during the summer monsoon season. When these air masses collide with the steep Khasi hills, they are forced upward, cooling rapidly and releasing their burden as torrents of rain. This process, known as orographic rainfall, is the key to Mawsynram's reputation. The geography of the land quite literally squeezes water from the sky, turning the village into a natural rain collector. The monsoon is not a single storm but a pattern, a rhythm that beats through the region year after year. Clouds gather like an army on the horizon, darkening the sky until day feels like twilight. Then the rain begins, not as a drizzle, but as a roaring sheet that hammers rooftops, drums on leaves, and floods paths within minutes. For months on end this cycle repeats. There is no gentle patter, no misty sprinkle. In Mawsynram, when it rains, it does so with conviction. Life here has been shaped entirely by this deluge. Houses are built with sloping roofs of grass or corrugated metal, designed to shed the endless water as efficiently as possible. Paths between villages often turn into rivers, so people carry large umbrellas made of bamboo and banana leaves, so wide they resemble portable huts. Villagers learn from a young age to live in harmony with dampness, drying clothes over smoky fires rather than under an unreliable sky. Even indoors, the air is never entirely free of moisture. Walls absorb it, floors reflect it, and furniture quietly swells with it. Yet the people of Mawsynram have not only endured the rain, they have embraced it. Farmers cultivate crops like rice and maize, which thrive in the saturated soil. Bamboo, one of the fastest growing plants in the world, flourishes in the humid climate and is used for everything from tools to homes. In some nearby villages, locals have even trained living tree roots into bridges, weaving them over streams swollen by rain. These living root bridges, strong and flexible, are testaments to patience and ingenuity, often taking decades to fully form but lasting centuries once complete. The sensory experience of Mawsynram is unlike anywhere else. Mist rolls over the hills, blurring the line between earth and sky. Leaves drip steadily long after each storm has passed, the forest echoing with a chorus of tiny water notes. Rivers roar and waterfalls thunder, tumbling in endless cascades from cliffs and slopes. The air smells perpetually of wet earth, moss, and green vegetation. Shoes squelch with every step, and the sound of rain on rooftops becomes as familiar as breathing. For locals, silence is not the absence of noise, but the brief pause between downpours. The challenges of perpetual dampness are real. Roads wash out, travel becomes difficult, and possessions are in constant danger of mildew. Even firewood must be carefully stored to keep it from becoming too wet to burn. For outsiders, it can feel overwhelming, as though the very air has turned to water. But those who live here see it differently. The rain is not an inconvenience. It is life itself. It fills streams, nourishes crops, and sustains the lush greenery that surrounds the village. Without it, the hills would not be so fertile, nor the forests so vibrant. there is also an undeniable beauty in the abundance. The Khasi Hills are a patchwork of rolling green slopes, veiled in drifting clouds. Waterfalls plunge in silver ribbons down cliff faces, sometimes appearing overnight after a particularly heavy storm. During the monsoon months, every surface seems alive with growth. Ferns uncurl, moss carpets, stone walls, and flowers bloom in brilliant defiance of the gloom. The land feels saturated not just with water, but with vitality, as if the rain has infused everything with energy. Scientists study the region to better understand monsoon dynamics and the delicate balance of rainfall patterns across South Asia. The monsoon is both a blessing and a challenge. It sustains agriculture across the subcontinent, but its intensity can also bring flooding and destruction. In Mawsynram, the relationship with the monsoon is especially close. It is not seen as an adversary to be fought, but as a force woven into daily existence. Visitors who arrive during the rainy season often find themselves astonished by the sheer relentlessness of the weather. Umbrellas turn inside out, ponchos cling uselessly to soaked clothing, and shoes surrender almost immediately. And yet, there is something exhilarating about standing in such a place, where nature's power is on display not in bursts of drama, but in endless persistence. It is a reminder that the elements do not always come in moderation, that sometimes they arrive in abundance beyond imagining. At night, when the rain softens, the sound becomes almost hypnotic, a steady rhythm on rooftops that lulls even weary travellers into sleep. The glow of lanterns reflects off puddles, and the mist outside curls like smoke through the narrow lanes. In those moments, Mawsynram feels not only extreme but magical, a place where the sky and the earth meet in an embrace of water. The wettest place on earth is not defined only by statistics and records, though those numbers are impressive. It is defined by the people who live within its embrace, the farmers who coax crops from drenched soil, the children who play in torrents of water as though it were summer sunshine, and the traditions that have grown in harmony with the rains. It is defined by the resilience of bamboo bridges, the patience of root structures that grow stronger with each season, and the forests that shimmer in perpetual mist. Mawsynram is a testament to the idea that even at the extremes, life does not merely survive, it thrives. The rain may be relentless, but so is the spirit of those who call this place home. In the Khasi Hills, where clouds descend like curtains and the sky seems to pour without end, existence has been built not in spite of the rain, but because of it. And in that endless downpour lies a lesson about adaptation, resilience, and the quiet beauty of abundance. Rising into the sky like a frozen citadel, Mount Everest is the tallest mountain on Earth, the peak against which all others are measured. Its summit, at just over 8,800 meters above sea level, touches a realm where the air is too thin for trees, too harsh for most animals, and where even humans can linger only briefly. Yet this mountain, standing among the Himalayas, is more than just a number on a chart. It is a monument to the power of geology, the resilience of life, and the boundless curiosity that drives people to stand where the world seems to end. The story of Everest begins far below, with the restless movements of Earth's crust. Around 50 million years ago, the Indian subcontinent carried on its tectonic plate, began colliding with Asia. This monumental impact forced rock upward in folds and thrusts, giving birth to the Himalayas. The collision has never truly ended. The mountains are still rising today, inch by inch, as the plates continue to push against one another. The height of Everest is not fixed but slowly changing, adjusted by the push of tectonics and the erosion of glaciers. To stand on its slopes is to stand on the visible scar of continents colliding, a reminder that Earth is not still but always in motion. The environment of Everest is as extreme as its origins. Above 5,000 meters, the air holds barely half the oxygen available at sea level. Breathing becomes laborious, every step feels heavier, and the body struggles to adapt. The summit lies in what climbers call the death zone, where oxygen levels are so low that the human body begins to deteriorate. Staying too long here is impossible, and yet, every year, people attempt the climb, drawn by the lure of standing at the highest point on Earth. Weather adds to the challenge. Jet stream winds sweep across the summit with hurricane force, and storms can appear suddenly, turning calm slopes into deadly whiteouts. Temperatures can plunge to minus 40 degrees Celsius, cold enough to freeze exposed skin in minutes. Snow and ice cover the upper reaches year-round, and avalanches roar down slopes with devastating speed. Despite these dangers, the mountain has a beauty that is difficult to describe, a beauty born of vast glaciers, sheer cliffs, and the sweeping panorama of peaks stretching into the distance. For those who live in the shadow of Everest, the mountain is not just a challenge but a neighbour. The Sherpa people, an ethnic group native to the high Himalayas, have built a culture in one of the harshest environments on the planet. Generations of life at high altitude have given them physiological adaptations, greater lung capacity, higher efficiency in oxygen use, and blood that carries more oxygen per breath than that of most lowland people. These adaptations, paired with remarkable resilience, make the Sherpas invaluable guides and climbers. But their culture is about more than physical endurance. Sherpas have long held spiritual connections to the mountains. Everest is known locally as Chomolungma, goddess mother of the world, a sacred presence that inspires reverence rather than conquest. Before expeditions, ceremonies are often performed to ask the mountain's blessing. Prayer flags ripple in the thin air, their colours carrying prayers outward on the wind. For Sherpas, the mountain is not simply an obstacle to be scaled, but a living presence that commands respect. In the villages scattered across the valleys, life is organised around the rhythm of the seasons. Potato fields cling to terraces, yaks graze on sparse grass, and monasteries stand watch over the communities. The thin air and isolation make every achievement a testament to adaptation. Houses are built of stone, fires fueled by yak dung in the absence of wood, and festivals celebrate both survival and joy in a landscape of extremes. Everest has long captured the imagination of the wider world. The first recorded attempts to climb it began in the early 20th century, with expeditions braving unknown routes, primitive equipment, and sheer uncertainty. In 1953, Edmund Hillary of New Zealand and Tenzing Norgay, a Sherpa climber, became the first confirmed pair to reach the summit, a feat that reverberated around the globe. Their success was not just a triumph of mountaineering but of human endurance, showing that even in the thinnest air, determination could prevail. Since then, thousands of climbers have attempted to follow in their footsteps. Some succeed, standing briefly on the roof of the world before descending into thicker air. Others are turned back by storms, exhaustion, or illness. The mountain demands respect, and it does not always grant safe passage. Yet the attraction remains powerful. To many, Everest is more than a summit. It is a symbol of reaching for limits, of testing the edge of possibility. But Everest is not defined only by climbers. It is also defined by the glaciers that flow from its slopes, feeding rivers like the Ganges and Brahmaputra, lifelines for hundreds of millions of people downstream. The mountain is part of a larger system that sustains life far beyond its base. Climate change is altering these glaciers, retreating ice threatening water supplies, and reshaping the future of those who depend on them. In this way, Everest is not just a distant challenge for adventurers, but a crucial part of the living planet. For all its dangers and difficulties, the mountain continues to inspire awe. To stand in its shadow, even at the base camp, is to feel the weight of immensity, the scale of rock and ice that humbles human ambition. Its slopes remind us of Earth's restless nature, of cultures that have flourished in high valleys, and of the curiosity that drives people to seek horizons beyond the ordinary. Mount Everest is often spoken of in terms of height and hardship, but it is also a reminder of beauty, resilience, and connection. It rises from a collision of continents, towers above landscapes shaped by time, and watches over communities that have learned to thrive where air itself seems scarce. In its grandeur lies a story of endurance, of geology, of culture, and of the human spirit that cannot resist looking upward and wondering what it might feel like to touch the sky. Far out in the western Pacific Ocean lies a place where Earth folds in on itself, plunging deeper than any canyon on land. This is the Mariana Trench, a vast scar in the seafloor that stretches for more than 2,500 kilometers and reaches depths of nearly 11 kilometers at its lowest point, Challenger Deep. To imagine that distance, picture Mount Everest turned upside down and planted in the trench. Its peak would still be well below the water's surface. The trench was formed by the slow, unstoppable process of subduction. Here, the Pacific Plate is sliding beneath the smaller Mariana Plate, driven downward into the mantle. As the plate bends, it drags the seafloor with it, creating a deep, narrow arc. This movement is part of the great tectonic engine that shapes our planet, recycling crust into the interior while raising mountains and volcanoes elsewhere. The Mariana Trench is a reminder that Earth is never still but always shifting, grinding and renewing itself on timescales far beyond human lifetimes. Conditions in the trench are beyond extreme. At the bottom, the pressure is over 1,000 times greater than at sea level. That is the equivalent of having 50 jumbo jets stacked on top of you. In this environment, steel would be crushed and air-filled spaces imploded instantly. It is a world without sunlight, cloaked in perpetual darkness, where temperatures hover just above freezing. For much of history, scientists assumed that such a place would be lifeless, too hostile for anything to survive, but life, as it so often does, found a way. Explorations using deep-diving submersibles and remotely operated vehicles have revealed a surprising cast of organisms. Strange amphipods, shrimp-like creatures swim in the inky blackness. Slime-covered snailfish thrive at depths no other vertebrates can tolerate. Microbes cluster around fissures in the seafloor, feeding on chemicals rather than sunlight. These organisms are adapted in remarkable ways. Their cell membranes strengthened against crushing pressure, their metabolisms fine-tuned to extract energy where almost none exists. They are fragile in our world but perfectly suited to theirs, thriving in a place that once seemed uninhabitable. The darkness of the trench is absolute. Sunlight penetrates only the upper few hundred meters of ocean, leaving the abyss below in eternal night. In this absence of light, many creatures generate their own through bioluminescence. Small flashes and glimmers punctuate the blackness, communication signals, lures for prey, or warnings to predators. In a way, the deep sea is not empty, but alive with pinpricks of alien beauty, a star field inverted and hidden beneath the waves. The first human visit to the deepest point came in 1960, when Jacques Picard and Don Walsh descended in the bathyscaphe Trieste. Encased in a thick steel sphere, they sank for nearly 5 hours before touching the seafloor. Their brief glimpse of the trench was murky, disturbed by clouds of silt, but it proved that humans could reach the deepest part of the ocean. More than 50 years later, filmmaker James Cameron made a solo dive to Challenger Deep, capturing clearer images of the barren but fascinating landscape. Since then, robotic missions have expanded our view, revealing ecosystems we're only beginning to understand. The trench is not just a curiosity, it is also a vital piece of Earth's systems. Subduction zones like this one are responsible for some of the planet's most powerful earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. They are also where old seafloor disappears into the mantle, balancing the creation of new crust at mid-ocean ridges. The Mariana Trench, in all its mystery, is part of the cycle that keeps Earth dynamic. Without such processes, the planet's surface would look very different indeed. Despite its remoteness, the trench is not immune to human influence. Plastic bags and other debris have been found at its depths, carried down by ocean currents and settling in places once thought untouchable. Even here, at the bottom of the sea, the fingerprints of human activity are visible. It is a sobering reminder that our reach extends further than we might wish, that our waste can descend into even the most inaccessible corners of the planet. Still, awe outweighs unease when contemplating the trench. Its immensity is humbling. The idea of a canyon of such depth, hidden beneath kilometers of water, stretches the imagination. It is a world we cannot see directly with our own eyes, but one that exists as vividly as any mountain range or forest. To study it is to peer into the unknown, to listen for whispers from the deep that tell of resilience, adaptation, and the grandeur of Earth's hidden places. Standing at the shore, watching waves roll in, it is easy to think of the ocean as a surface, a restless but shallow expanse, yet beneath lies a realm as dramatic as any continent, filled with peaks, valleys, and trenches. The Mariana Trench is the most extreme of these, a frontier not in space but on our own planet. It reminds us that much of Earth remains unexplored, that beneath the waves are landscapes and creatures still waiting to be discovered. To reflect on the trench is to reflect on the limits of knowledge. It's a place where pressure and darkness rule, where life takes forms unlike any we are used to, and where geology writes stories in stone and silence. It may be out of sight, but it is not out of reach, and each descent into its depths reveals new wonders. The Mariana Trench stands as a testament to the mystery of the seas, a reminder that even on a well-mapped planet there are still abysses left to inspire awe and wonder. Far below sea level, tucked between the arid hills of the Middle East, lies one of Earth's most unusual landscapes. The Dead Sea Depression is the lowest point of exposed land on the planet, a basin sunk more than 400 meters beneath the level of the world's oceans. It is a place where water lingers but does not flow out, where salt crystals crust along the shore, and where stillness is so complete that it feels otherworldly. The depression itself is part of the larger Jordan Rift Valley, created by the slow movement of tectonic plates along the Dead Sea Transform Fault. Over millions of years, these shifting plates pulled the land apart, leaving a deep scar that eventually filled with water from the Jordan River and smaller tributaries. Unlike other lakes, however, the Dead Sea has no outlet. Every drop of water that enters either evaporates beneath the searing sun or sinks into the sediments. Over time, the minerals left behind have concentrated to astonishing levels, giving the water its famous density and saltiness. This hypersalinity is the defining feature of the Dead Sea. With salt concentrations more than 10 times that of the ocean, the water is so dense that it seems to push back against anything placed in it. Swimmers find themselves floating effortlessly, bobbing on the surface as if perched on an invisible raft. It is impossible to sink, a fact that has delighted countless visitors and baffled anyone experiencing it for the first time. But the salt that makes floating so easy also ensures that life here is minimal. Fish cannot survive, and only a few hardy microbes and algae tolerate the extreme chemistry. The name Dead Sea is not entirely accurate. There is life here, but it is life in its simplest, most resilient forms. The salt itself is more than a curiosity. It has shaped human history. For thousands of years, the minerals of the Dead Sea have been harvested for use in medicine, cosmetics, and agriculture. Ancient Egyptians used bitumen from the area in mummification. Roman soldiers valued the salts as preservatives. Today, vast evaporation ponds line the southern end of the sea, extracting potassium and other valuable minerals. The waters have also long been associated with health, with spas and resorts drawing visitors who seek the reputed healing powers of the mineral-rich mud. Geographically, the Dead Sea Depression is more than just a geological oddity. It sits at the intersection of modern Israel, Jordan, and the West Bank, making it a borderland in both political and cultural terms. Towns and resorts on each side reflect different traditions, but all are bound by the shared presence of the Great Salt Lake. The surrounding landscape is stark but striking. Rugged mountains and plateaus rise sharply from the shoreline, their rocky faces shifting in colour from ochre to deep red as the light changes. It is a place where desert meets water, where harshness and abundance coexist uneasily. The stillness of the Dead Sea is one of its most haunting qualities. Unlike oceans or rivers, it does not ripple with tides or flow with current. Its surface lies quiet beneath the burning sun, a vast mirror reflecting the cliffs and sky above. On calm days, the water is so glassy that the horizon dissolves, making it difficult to tell where the earth ends and the heavens begin. Walking along the shoreline, one hears little but the crunch of salt crystals underfoot and the faint hiss of evaporating water. It is a silence that feels profound, as if the world itself has paused. Evaporation, however, is not only a poetic detail, it is also a growing problem. The Dead Sea is shrinking. Over the past century, the diversion of water from the Jordan River for agriculture and human use has drastically reduced inflow, while mineral extraction has further lowered water levels. The shoreline has retreated dramatically, leaving behind salt flats and sinkholes. These sinkholes, caused by underground salt layers dissolving as fresh water intrudes, can appear suddenly, swallowing sections of land and road. They are stark reminders that even timeless landscapes are vulnerable to human activity. Despite these challenges, the Dead Sea remains a place of fascination. For travellers, the sensation of floating weightlessly on its dense waters is unforgettable. For geologists, the depression is a textbook example of Rift Valley processes. For historians, it is tied to ancient kingdoms, biblical stories, and millennia of human settlement in one of the most arid environments on Earth. Few places combine so much science, history, and symbolism in such a compact space. The atmosphere here is unlike anywhere else. The air feels heavy, enriched with minerals carried by the water and warmed by the sun. The high salinity and altitude below sea level even give the region a slightly higher atmospheric pressure, meaning there is more oxygen in the air than at most places on Earth. This may be one reason the Dead Sea has been promoted for its health benefits, as visitors with respiratory problems sometimes find the air easier to breathe. Add to this the mineral-rich mud, prized for its effect on the skin, and it is little wonder that spa culture thrives along the shoreline. Yet the most lasting impression is not of health resorts or scientific interest, but of the landscape itself. Salt crystals gather in fantastical shapes along the water's edge, forming white terraces and encrusted boulders that gleam in the sunlight. Small waves lap against them, depositing new layers that sparkle like frost. At dawn and dusk, the colours are ethereal. The water shifts from silver to turquoise. The cliffs glow pink, and the entire basin seems caught between dream and reality. The Dead Sea Depression may be the lowest point of land on Earth, but it feels elevated in other ways. It invites reflection, encouraging anyone who visits to pause and take in the stillness. It is a reminder of how geology shapes life, how scarcity can give rise to resilience, and how even the harshest places can be filled with quiet beauty. To stand on its shore is to stand at the edge of extremes, where salt and silence dominate, and where Earth reveals another of its remarkable faces. Out in the North Atlantic, just below the Arctic Circle, lies an island that seems to embody contradiction. Iceland is a land where fire and ice share the same ground, where volcanoes rise beside glaciers, and where steaming geysers erupt in landscapes dusted with snow. It is one of the most volcanically active places on Earth, a restless island that owes its very existence to the movements of tectonic plates and the surge of magma from below. The island sits astride the mid-Atlantic ridge, a vast undersea mountain chain where the Eurasian and North American plates are slowly pulling apart. Iceland is unusual because here the ridge is not hidden beneath the ocean. It emerges above the surface, exposing the mechanics of plate tectonics in plain view. Beneath the island lies a mantle plume, a column of hot rock rising from deep within the earth. Together, the spreading plates and the plume provide a double dose of volcanic energy, fueling eruptions that have shaped the island for millions of years. The result is a landscape that feels brand new in geological terms. Lava fields stretch for kilometres, black rock hardened into rippled waves where molten rivers once flowed. Cones and craters pockmark the countryside, some long dormant, others steaming with heat. In places the ground hisses, releasing plumes of sulphurous gas that smell faintly of eggs, but remind you that magma still bubbles beneath. New land is constantly being created, a reminder that Iceland is not a finished product but a work in progress. For the people who live here, this fiery geology is both a challenge and a gift. Eruptions can be disruptive, as history has shown. In the late 18th century, the Laki eruption spewed lava and toxic gases for months, devastating farmland and causing widespread famine. More recently, the eruption of Eyjafjallajökull in 2010 captured global attention, when its ash cloud grounded flights across Europe for days. These events highlight the power of volcanoes to shape not only local life but even international events. Yet volcanic energy is also one of Iceland's greatest assets. The same forces that bring eruptions also heat underground water, producing geysers that shoot skyward and hot springs that bubble invitingly. Geothermal energy is harnessed to provide heat and electricity for much of the country. Houses are warmed by water drawn straight from the earth, and swimming pools are fed by natural hot springs. Even sidewalks in Reykjavik are sometimes heated by geothermal pipes, keeping them free of snow in winter. It is a remarkable example of people adapting to and benefiting from the restless planet beneath their feet. The contrast between fire and ice is perhaps the most striking feature of Iceland. Glaciers cover around 10% of the island, slow rivers of ice carving valleys and shaping mountains. Beneath some of these glaciers, volcanoes lie hidden, creating a dramatic interplay of heat and cold. When eruptions occur beneath the ice, they can melt vast quantities of water, unleashing sudden floods called jökulhlaups that rush down valleys with astonishing force. The idea of fire erupting beneath ice might seem impossible, but in Iceland it is simply another part of the landscape's restless rhythm. For visitors, the sights of Iceland's volcanic world are unforgettable. The geyser Strokka erupts every few minutes, sending boiling water up to 20 meters into the air. Fields of lava stretch like frozen seas, covered in soft green moss that makes the land look both alien and gentle. The Blue Lagoon, a geothermal spa with milky turquoise waters, has become iconic, though its warm pools are only one example of Iceland's abundant hot springs. In the north, Lake Mývatn is surrounded by volcanic craters and steaming vents, a landscape that feels like the set of a fantasy tale. The island is not just about spectacle, it is also a place of daily coexistence with geological extremes. Farmers tend sheep on grassy pastures that lie between lava ridges. Fishing villages thrive along the coasts, where the warmth of the Gulf Stream keeps harbours ice-free even in winter. Towns are small, but life is deeply rooted in the land and its resources. Many Icelanders feel a strong sense of connection to the geology, seeing it not only as a source of danger but also as an essential part of their identity. This connection is reflected in folklore as well. Stories of trolls, elves and hidden folk are woven into the culture, often tied to particular rocks, hills or lava formations. The dramatic landscape seems to invite myth-making, as if ordinary explanations are not enough to account for its strangeness. In a place where mountains can smoke, ice can burst apart, and the ground itself can glow red, it is not hard to see why imagination flourishes. Scientists study Iceland to understand volcanic processes more clearly, since the island offers such visible access to tectonics at work. The Rift Valley at Thingvellir, where the plates are literally pulling apart, is a reminder that continents are not static. Here, one can walk between cliffs that mark the divide between Europe and North America, a tangible symbol of the forces that shape our world. The island is both laboratory and home, a place where science and daily life intersect. Despite the eruptions and the constant reminder that the Earth is alive beneath their feet, Icelanders have embraced their volcanic homeland. They use its energy to live sustainably. They celebrate its uniqueness through art and culture, and they welcome travellers eager to witness its wonders. Few other places illustrate so vividly the balance between danger and opportunity, between destruction and renewal. Iceland's volcanic nature makes it one of the most dynamic corners of the Earth, a place where extremes coexist in harmony. Fire erupts beneath ice, steam rises beside glaciers, and human life flourishes between lava fields. To walk here is to feel the pulse of the planet, to sense both its fury and its generosity. It is a reminder that our world is not fixed but forever reshaping itself, and that even in the most dramatic landscapes, people can find a way not only to endure but to thrive. In the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean, far from any major landmass, lies a small volcanic island where a few hundred people live in quiet rhythm with the sea. This is Tristan da Cunha, often called the most remote inhabited island settlement on Earth. Its nearest neighbour is St Helena, more than 2,000 kilometres away, and the nearest continental coastline is South Africa, lying nearly 2,500 kilometres distant. Surrounded on all sides by vast, restless waters, Tristan da Cunha is both a speck on the map and a remarkable testament to human community in isolation. The island itself is dramatic, a steep volcanic cone rising out of the ocean, its summit often wrapped in clouds. The slopes are green with grass and dotted with streams, but the higher reaches are rugged and inhospitable. The settlement, known simply as Edinburgh of the Seven Seas, clings to the northwestern coast, a collection of houses facing out toward the Atlantic. It is a place where the sound of the surf is constant, where the horizon is always the ocean, and where distance shapes every aspect of life. Reaching Tristan da Cunha is no small task. There is no airport and no easy connection to the outside world. The only way in or out is by ship, and supply vessels make the journey only a handful of times each year. The trip from South Africa takes more than a week, depending on weather, and the seas are often rough. For the islanders, the arrival of a ship is a major event, bringing not just goods and mail, but also the rare sight of new faces. For visitors, stepping ashore feels like travelling not only across oceans but across time, into a slower and more deliberate way of life. Daily life on Tristan is grounded in simplicity and community. The population hovers around 250 people, most descended from a small group of settlers who arrived in the early 19th century. Families know each other well, and cooperation is essential. Farming provides much of the island's food. Potatoes are a staple crop, grown in plots of fertile volcanic soil. Livestock graze on the grassy slopes, and the sea provides a steady supply of fish, particularly crayfish, which are also exported to sustain the island's economy. Work is shared and seasonal. Fishing expeditions depend on weather, and farming follows the rhythm of the year. When repairs are needed, neighbours lend hands, tools and time. Houses are modest, but sturdy, built to withstand the storms that sweep across the Atlantic. Roads are few, and vehicles are limited. Most distances can be covered on foot. There are no bustling streets, no shopping malls, and no rush-hour traffic. Instead, there is a quiet hum of life, a steady pace that values sufficiency over speed. Isolation has shaped not only the economy but also the culture. Traditions run deep, and the sense of identity as Tristanians is strong. The island has its own unique dialect, blending English with words and phrases drawn from the ancestors who first settled here, a mixture of Scots, Dutch, Italians, and others, who found themselves marooned by choice or by fate. The small school educates children through their teenage years, after which some leave to study abroad before deciding whether to return. Returning home is a decision shaped not only by affection, but by a commitment to a life defined by distance. In such remoteness, challenges are inevitable. Medical care is basic, and emergencies sometimes require long waits for evacuation. Supplies are limited, so self-reliance is essential. Islanders grow, preserve, and share food, making use of what the land and sea provide. Entertainment is homemade, Social gatherings, dances, and communal events mark the calendar. The internet has reached the island, shrinking the distance in some ways, but the physical separation remains profound. It is one thing to speak to someone thousands of kilometers away. It is another to wait months for a package or to see the horizon stretch endlessly with no other land in sight. And yet the solitude carries its own rewards. The natural environment is pristine, with seabirds wheeling above cliffs and seals basking on rocky shores. Nights are filled with the brilliance of unpolluted skies, stars shining in a density rarely seen elsewhere. The sea, though sometimes a barrier, is also a provider and a companion. Islanders speak of the deep connection they feel to the ocean, both for its bounty and for the way it defines their existence. There is also a certain peace in living without constant intrusion from the outside world. In many ways, Tristan da Cunha functions as a single extended family, where cooperation and understanding are necessities rather than luxuries. Disagreements do arise, as they do in any community, but in such a small place, resolution is essential. Harmony is not optional, it is survival. Visitors often remark on the warmth of the people. Though the island is remote, hospitality is central to its culture. Guests are welcomed, housed, and fed with a generosity born of shared experience. Perhaps it is the knowledge that anyone who reaches Tristan has made a long and difficult journey that makes their arrival feel significant. Encounters here are not casual, they are meaningful, marked by recognition of the effort required simply to meet. The island's isolation has also captured the imagination of writers and dreamers. It represents both the ultimate escape and the ultimate commitment. To live on Tristan is to step away from the noise of the modern world, to accept limitations in exchange for simplicity, and to find connection in the company of a small, close-knit group. For some, that sounds like a hardship. For others, it sounds like paradise. Tristan da Cunha is not famous for towering mountains or vast rivers. Its claim to fame is its remoteness, its steadfast existence at the edge of the map, and yet, in that remoteness lies its beauty. It shows that community does not depend on numbers, that meaning does not require constant change, and that life can flourish even when the rest of the world is thousands of kilometers away. To stand on its shore is to feel the immensity of the ocean, the fragility of settlement, and the strength of human bonds. It is to realize that solitude does not mean loneliness, that connection can be found in the smallest of places, and that sometimes the most remarkable extremes are not measured in meters or degrees, but in the quiet persistence of people who choose to live together, surrounded on all sides by nothing but sea and sky. Far to the north, halfway between mainland Norway and the North Pole, lies the Svalbard archipelago, a realm of icy fjords, glacier-carved valleys, and rugged mountains where the Arctic Ocean laps at frozen shores. It is here that one of the Earth's most striking extremes takes place, the long polar night. For several months each winter, the sun does not rise above the horizon at all. Instead, Svalbard is cloaked in a darkness that stretches day into night and back again, a darkness that reshapes both landscape and life. The polar night begins in late October and holds fast until mid-February. During this time, the sun remains hidden below the horizon, and the land is lit only by moonlight, starlight, and the shifting glow of the aurora borealis. At first, the change is gradual. Each day the sun rises a little lower, until finally it disappears altogether, leaving the community to settle into a twilight existence. The transition can feel almost magical, as the last golden rays fade and the first true darkness wraps the land like a vast blanket. Life during these months requires not just physical adaptation, but psychological adjustment. The human body has evolved in rhythm with the cycle of day and night, and when that rhythm is removed, strange things happen. Sleep patterns become irregular. Some people find themselves feeling drowsy at odd hours, while others struggle with insomnia. Energy levels dip, moods shift, and time itself feels slippery when days are indistinguishable from nights. To counter these effects, residents turn to artificial light therapy. bright lamps that mimic the intensity of daylight are used in homes and workplaces, helping to trick the brain into maintaining a sense of normalcy. For many, these lights are not luxuries but essential tools for keeping spirits steady in the absence of the sun. Communities in Svalbard have learned to embrace the polar night rather than fight it. Daily routines continue, but with adjustments. Schools remain open, shops operate, and research stations conduct their work, all illuminated by the warm glow of electric lights. People make an effort to gather socially, to maintain human warmth in contrast to the surrounding cold. Cafes, pubs, and communal events become lifelines, places where conversation and laughter push back against the endless darkness. The darkness, however, is not complete. The moon, when it is full, casts an ethereal light across the snow, turning mountains and valleys into a silver landscape that glows with quiet majesty. Starlight, unhindered by pollution, fills the sky with a brilliance that feels almost overwhelming. And then there are the northern lights, shimmering across the heavens in ribbons of green, violet, and red. On clear nights, the aurora borealis dances over the fjords, weaving curtains of light that ripple like fabric in a cosmic breeze. Watching the aurora is one of the great rewards of enduring the polar night, a reminder that even in absence, beauty finds a way to appear. Psychologists studying people in Svalbard note that adaptation to such conditions relies on a mixture of routine, social bonds, and mindset. Rather than viewing the polar night as a hardship, many residents see it as a special season, a time of reflection and slower living. It is a chance to focus on indoor projects, to share long meals with friends, or to venture outside into a world that feels surreal, bathed in starlight and silence. This shift in perspective makes all the difference between endurance and enjoyment. For newcomers, the experience can be disorienting. Days blur together when there is no sunrise or sunset to mark the passage of time. Without careful planning, it is easy to lose track of hours, to forget whether it is morning or evening. Yet once the body and mind begin to settle, the rhythm of the polar night reveals its own kind of peace. The absence of daylight removes the urgency of ordinary schedules, creating space for quietness and contemplation. Animals, too, adapt in their own ways. Arctic foxes, reindeer, and seabirds continue their lives under the dim glow of the moon and stars. Some migrate southward, while others tough it out, foraging and hunting in the shadows. Polar bears roam the ice, perfectly suited to a world of darkness and snow. Their presence serves as a constant reminder that life does not pause simply because the sun is absent. Instead, it shifts and reshapes, finding opportunity where humans might see only hardship. There is also a strange beauty in the contrast between indoor and outdoor worlds. Step outside, and the cold bites sharply, the snow crunches underfoot, and the sky stretches in infinite blackness, scattered with stars. Step back indoors and you're greeted by the warmth of fires, the golden glow of lamps and the hum of community. This contrast heightens the experience of both, making light feel richer and darkness feel more profound. When February arrives and the first edge of the sun peaks above the horizon, it is celebrated with joy. The return of daylight is marked with festivals and gatherings, people climbing hillsides to catch the very first rays after months without. The sun's reappearance feels almost miraculous, as though a long winter spell has finally been lifted. But many locals also look back fondly on the polar night, recognizing it as a season that offers something rare, the chance to live in a world shaped not by daylight, but by its absence. The longest polar night is not simply a test of endurance. It is an invitation to experience time differently, to find beauty in what is usually feared, and to embrace a rhythm that is alien, yet deeply human in its own way. It reminds us that life can adapt to almost anything, that darkness can hold wonder, and that even without the sun, the world continues to turn with quiet persistence. In Svalbard, the night does not defeat life, it defines it. and in doing so creates one of the most extraordinary extremes found anywhere on Earth. At the bottom of the world, when winter finally loosens its grip, the most astonishing reversal takes place. The Antarctic summer arrives, and with it comes the longest day on Earth. For months on end, the sun does not dip below the horizon, circling the sky in a slow, endless loop, pouring light over a landscape that only recently lay in frozen darkness. This is the season of the polar day, 24 hours of daylight without pause, when Antarctica briefly awakens into a world of activity and abundance. The reason for this endless day lies in the tilt of Earth's axis. Because the planet leans as it orbits the sun, regions near the poles experience extreme shifts in daylight. In winter, the tilt hides the sun completely, creating months of darkness. In summer, the same tilt keeps the sun perpetually above the horizon. At the South Pole, the sun rises in September and does not set again until March. It does not climb high overhead, but skims around the horizon, circling in a steady arc and casting long shadows even at midday. The light is constant, but its angle gives it a strange, golden quality, as though the world is caught in a perpetual sunrise. The effect on the land is profound. Glaciers and ice sheets glitter in the low sun, their surfaces sparkling with countless crystals. Mountains loom in sharp relief, their ridges glowing orange as the light grazes their slopes. The sea ice begins to crack and retreat, opening channels of water along the coasts. Where darkness once dominated, light now floods every corner, and the transformation is so complete it feels almost unreal. The wildlife of Antarctica depends on this brief season of light. For penguins, this is the time of frenzy. Colonies numbering in the tens of thousands gather on rocky beaches, filling the air with a cacophony of calls. Nests are built, eggs are laid, and chicks hatch into a world of continuous daylight. Parents waddle back and forth to the sea, shuttling food for their hungry offspring. Standing among such a colony is like stepping into a crowd at a concert, except the audience is feathered, the music is endless honking, and the performers are decidedly less graceful. One might even imagine that with so much sun, even the penguins could do with tiny sunglasses. Seals haul out onto the ice, basking in the constant daylight as they rest between feeding trips. Whales arrive in the Southern Ocean, drawn by the explosion of krill that feeds on blooms of phytoplankton, which in turn flourish under the round-the-clock sunlight. Albatrosses and petrels wheel overhead, their wings cutting across skies that never darken. The entire ecosystem comes alive in a compressed rush of activity, as if the animals know they have only a short window in which to feed, breed, and raise their young before darkness returns. For scientists stationed in Antarctica, the summer brings opportunity. Research that is impossible during the frozen night becomes feasible under constant light. Ice cores are drilled, measuring sticks are placed on glaciers, and instruments are maintained in conditions far more forgiving than winter. The 24-hour day allows for work at any time, though it also disrupts sleep, as the body struggles to adjust to the absence of night. Thick blinds are drawn across windows, and some scientists wear eye masks to mimic darkness. But even so, the endless sun can play tricks on time. One can step outside at what feels like midday, only to discover that the clock insists it is 3 a.m. There's also a peculiar calm to the polar day. The light is gentle, slanting and soft, illuminating everything without ever being harsh. Shadows stretch endlessly, giving the landscape an almost surreal texture. The horizon glows even at midnight, and the sense of timelessness is inescapable. It is as though the world has slipped free from its usual rhythm of dawn and dusk, drifting instead in an endless loop of golden light. The psychological effect can be both uplifting and strange. After months of darkness, the return of the sun feels joyous, almost overwhelming. Energy surges, moods lift, and the landscape seems transformed into a stage of constant brilliance. Yet the absence of night can be unsettling. Humans are creatures of cycles, and when those cycles are disrupted, time loses its edges. Days blur, rest becomes elusive, and some find themselves wide awake when they should be sleeping. But most adapt, embracing the surreal quality of a world without darkness, savouring the chance to live in constant light, even if it bends the mind's sense of normality. The polar day also reveals Antarctica in ways impossible during winter. Icebergs glow with deep blues, their sculpted forms dazzling under the steady sun. Meltwater pools glisten atop glaciers, reflecting the sky like shards of glass. The ocean shimmers as far as the eye can see, dotted with the black backs of whales or the spray of distant surf against ice cliffs. Photographers and scientists alike are captivated, for every hour offers the perfect lighting, every moment a scene bathed in radiance. Historically, the polar day was both a gift and a challenge for explorers. Early expeditions relied on the constant light to travel and map the terrain, but they also struggled with exhaustion, as their bodies failed to recognize when to rest. Diaries describe the surreal feeling of marching at what felt like afternoon, only to find it was well past midnight. The endless sun was a companion, but also a trickster, erasing the line between work and recovery. For those men, trapped in wooden huts on the edge of the ice, the sun was both blessing and burden. For the animals, however, there is no confusion. The polar day is the heartbeat of survival. Penguins feed their chicks with unrelenting dedication, seals gorge to build reserves of fat, and whales sweep through krill swarms devouring millions of tiny crustaceans. The abundance of summer light cascades through the ecosystem, nourishing plankton, sustaining fish, feeding birds and fueling mammals. Without this brief but intense season of plenty, life in the Antarctic would not be possible. When the sun finally begins to sink again in March, the change is met with a kind of quiet inevitability. Shadows lengthen, nights return, and the landscape prepares once more for the long dark winter. The polar day, like the polar night, is fleeting, a reminder of the extremes written into Earth's tilt. Its brilliance lingers in memory, though, the sight of penguin colonies bustling in the sun, the glow of ice under perpetual light, the calm majesty of a world that never sleeps. The longest day on Earth is not one of heat and beaches, but of ice and endurance. It is a season when the frozen continent bursts into life, when the sky never dims, and when the contrast of fire and ice is replaced by the contrast of nightless brilliance and the shadows yet to come. To witness it is to see time suspended, a rare and wondrous extreme of our planet's design. High on the Altiplano of Bolivia lies a place so dazzling and surreal that it seems less like a landscape and more like a dream painted across the earth. This is Salar de Uyuni, the largest salt flat in the world, a vast expanse stretching more than 10,000 square kilometers, shimmering under the Andean sun. At first glance, it appears almost too simple, an endless plain of white stretching to the horizon. Yet within that simplicity lies a profound beauty, a place where sky and land merge so seamlessly that the boundary between them dissolves. The story of Salar de Uyuni begins millions of years ago, when vast prehistoric lakes covered this region. As the climate shifted, these waters evaporated, leaving behind thick crusts of salt and minerals. Over time, layer upon layer built up, forming a surface so flat that it is used today to calibrate satellites. Beneath the gleaming crust lies a rich brine filled with lithium, the element now powering smartphones, laptops, and electric vehicles. In fact, the Salar contains one of the largest lithium reserves on Earth, making this quiet plain of salt one of the most significant resources of the 21st century. But before lithium and industry, there is the sheer experience of the place itself. In the dry season, the Salar stretches like a frozen ocean, its surface cracked into geometric patterns that repeat endlessly, hexagons formed as salt crystals expand and contract under the blazing sun. Walking across it is disorienting, for every direction looks the same, and distances are swallowed by the immensity of white. It feels like standing at the edge of the world, where the ordinary rules of perspective no longer apply. In the rainy season, the landscape undergoes an even greater transformation. A thin sheet of water spreads across the flats, turning them into the largest natural mirror on the planet. The sky reflects so perfectly that clouds appear to drift both above and below, creating the illusion of floating in an endless blue expanse. Photographs of this phenomenon seem surreal, but the reality is even more breathtaking. It is as though the Earth has opened a window into the heavens, allowing the two to meet in a moment of fragile perfection. Despite its starkness, Salar de Uyuni is alive with history and life. Along its edges, pink flamingos gather in great flocks, feeding on algae that thrive in the mineral-rich waters. Their presence adds sudden bursts of colour against the monochrome salt, as though the land itself decided to add brushstrokes of life to its canvas. Llamas graze in the surrounding highlands, tended by local herders who have lived here for generations. Villages dot the edges of the flats, their people harvesting salt blocks and guiding travellers who come in search of this remarkable place. For centuries, the salt itself has been a source of sustenance. Workers carve the crust into neat blocks, drying them in the sun before carrying them to nearby markets. The work is arduous, yet it ties communities to the land in a way that modern extraction does not. In recent years, however, global demand for lithium has drawn increasing attention to the salar. Beneath its glittering surface lies brine rich in lithium salts, and companies seek to harvest this resource to fuel the world's growing appetite for renewable energy and electric cars. The salar, once valued for its stark beauty and traditional salt, is now at the centre of debates about development, environment, and the future of technology. And yet, standing on the flats, all of that seems distant. The mind is captured by the silence, by the endless horizon where earth and sky blend. The salar encourages stillness. There is no rushing here, no trees to rustle in the wind, no rivers to break the silence. Only the crunch of footsteps on salt, the whisper of wind across an open plain, and the play of light across an infinite canvas. It is a place that quiets the noise of modern life, offering instead a meditation on scale and simplicity. There are islands scattered across this white sea, rocky outcrops that rise above the salt. The most famous, Isla Inkawasi, is covered with towering cacti, some of them centuries old, standing like silent sentinels above the blinding flats. From its slopes, the view stretches in every direction without end, salt, sky, and distant mountains. It is from these vantage points that the immensity of Salar de Uyuni truly comes into perspective. What feels flat and endless up close becomes a vast shimmering sea when seen from above. The salt flats also hold a touch of the surreal in their utility. Their perfect flatness makes them a natural laboratory for calibrating the instruments of satellites, a reminder that this ancient landscape is not only beautiful but scientifically invaluable. In a sense, the Salar is a bridge between worlds, born of ancient lakes, home to flamingos and cacti, yet also part of the cutting edge of space technology and global energy. For travellers, the Salar leaves impressions that linger long after departure. Sunrise casts the flats in hues of pink and gold, while sunset paints them in orange and purple. At night, when the water mirror reflects the Milky Way, the effect is nothing short of cosmic. The stars seem to stretch below as well as above, and the sensation of standing in the middle of infinity is both humbling and exhilarating. Few places on Earth can make a person feel so small, yet so profoundly connected to the universe. In the end, Salar de Uyuni is not just the saltiest place on the planet, it is a place where history, science, and beauty meet. It is where ancient waters left their mark, where flamingos add grace to a barren stage, and where human ingenuity finds both resources and inspiration. It is a place that invites reflection, literally and figuratively, reminding us that Earth's extremes are not only about survival, but also about wonder. To stand upon it is to see the sky at your feet, to feel the vastness of the planet, and to understand that sometimes the simplest landscapes are the most extraordinary of all. There is a place on Earth where life gathers in such overwhelming abundance that it seems the planet has poured every shade of green and every form of creature into one immense basin. The Amazon rainforest, sprawling across 9 countries in South America, is the most biodiverse region on land, a living library of species that continues to astonish even those who have studied it for decades. Covering more than 5.5 million square kilometres, it is so vast that it produces its own weather, recycles its own water, and harbours 1/10 of all known species on the planet. The forest is not a uniform blanket of trees but a layered kingdom, each stratum supporting its own caste of life. High above, the emergent layer rises with trees stretching 60 metres or more into the sky, their crowns catching the first light of dawn. These giants are few but mighty, standing like sentinels above the rest. Just below lies the canopy, a dense ceiling of branches and leaves that forms the beating heart of the forest. This green roof is home to countless species of birds, monkeys, insects, and epiphytes, plants that perch upon branches rather than rooting in the ground. The canopy is alive with sound, a riot of calls, trills, and wing beats, a busy metropolis suspended above the forest floor. Beneath this lies the understory, dim and humid, where shafts of sunlight filter down in golden beams. Here, insects buzz, frogs croak, and jaguars move with quiet stealth. The air is heavy with moisture and the scent of vegetation, a reminder that decay and growth are locked in a constant cycle. At ground level, the forest floor is surprisingly open, shaded by the layers above. Leaf litter crunches softly underfoot, and fungi sprout in vivid colours, breaking down organic matter and feeding nutrients back into the soil. Each layer is interconnected, forming an intricate web of relationships where the survival of one often depends on the presence of many others. The diversity of species is staggering. The Amazon is home to more than 2,000 bird species, from the bright macaws that scream across the treetops to the hummingbirds that dart like living jewels among flowers. There are over 400 species of mammals, including sloths that dangle lazily from branches and river dolphins that glide through murky waters. The reptile population is equally rich, from caimans lurking along riverbanks to anacondas coiled in marshes. Amphibians thrive in the damp understory, with frogs that flash neon colours as warnings to predators. And then there are the insects, millions of them, from leafcutter ants that march in endless lines, carrying green banners of leaves to butterflies that drift like confetti in shafts of light. Plants too tell a story of exuberant variety. Towering ceiba trees with massive trunks anchor the forest, while lianas twist upward in search of light. Orchids bloom in delicate bursts of colour, clinging to branches high in the canopy. Medicinal plants grow in abundance, many still unknown to science, their properties part of a vast pharmacopoeia discovered by indigenous peoples long before modern medicine arrived. Every corner of the Amazon seems to harbour a new discovery, a new form of life waiting to be recognised. Yet beneath this vibrancy lies fragility. The Amazon functions as a finely balanced system. Trees draw water from the ground and release it into the air, creating vast clouds that drift and fall as rain. In this way, the forest makes its own weather, recycling moisture in a grand cycle that sustains not only itself, but also regions far beyond. The Amazon is often called the lungs of the planet, producing a significant portion of the world's oxygen and storing immense amounts of carbon. Its health affects climates across continents, and its decline sends ripples through the global system. Human activity, however, has placed this balance under strain. Deforestation for agriculture, logging and development carves into the forest, fragmenting habitats and threatening species. Fires, both natural and human-caused, burn through areas that once seemed impenetrable. The loss of trees disrupts rainfall cycles, while biodiversity diminishes as habitats shrink. It is a reminder that abundance does not guarantee permanence, that even the richest ecosystem can be vulnerable, and yet the Amazon is resilient. Left alone, it regenerates with astonishing speed, seedlings pushing through gaps in the canopy, vines climbing upward, and wildlife returning as habitats recover. Indigenous communities, many of whom have lived here for thousands of years, hold deep knowledge of how to live with the forest rather than against it. Their traditions and practices form part of the delicate balance that has allowed the Amazon to thrive for millennia. Experiencing the forest is overwhelming to the senses. The air is warm and thick, filled with the scent of damp earth and the chorus of unseen animals. Colours flash in every direction: scarlet feathers, emerald leaves, golden sunlight, and the iridescent shimmer of insect wings. At dawn, the canopy erupts in sound as birds announce the day, while at night, the forest hums and clicks with the voices of nocturnal creatures. The rivers, dark and winding, carry the lifeblood of the basin, connecting distant parts of the forest like arteries in a body. To drift along these waters is to pass through a living labyrinth, each bend revealing a new tableau of life. There is a whispering quality to the Amazon, as though the forest is always murmuring just out of reach, secrets carried on the rustle of leaves and the drip of water. One can sit quietly on the forest floor and feel surrounded by a living presence, not chaotic but symphonic, each element playing its part in a larger harmony. It is both humbling and comforting to realize that this immense variety is not random but interconnected, each species fitting into a system that has evolved over countless generations. The Amazon is not merely a collection of trees and animals, it is an intricate, breathing entity. Its diversity represents possibility, resilience, and the endless creativity of life. But it also represents responsibility. To care for such abundance is to recognize that we are part of the same fabric, bound to the health of the forest, whether we live beside it or half a world away. In the end, the Amazon rainforest stands as Earth's great testament to biodiversity, a reminder of what life can achieve when given time and space. Its canopy shelters wonders, its rivers sustain abundance, and its soil nurtures endless growth. To speak of it in numbers alone is to miss its essence. The Amazon is not just the most biodiverse place on Earth, it is a living masterpiece, a whispering green heart that beats for the entire planet. Encircling the frozen continent of Antarctica is a restless band of water that never quite seems to find peace. The Southern Ocean, swirling endlessly with the might of the Antarctic circumpolar current, is home to some of the stormiest seas on Earth. Here winds roar without interruption, and waves rise in great rolling walls, driven by a band of latitude sailors of long feared and respected. Within this realm lies the Drake Passage, the narrow stretch between the southern tip of South America and the northern reaches of the Antarctic Peninsula. It is here that the ocean unleashes some of its fiercest moods, a place of howling gales, towering swells, and a constant reminder of the planet's untamed forces. The ferocity of these waters is not random. Geography and physics conspire to create the perfect stage for turbulence. The Southern Ocean is unique because it flows uninterrupted around the globe. No continent blocks its path, so the Antarctic circumpolar current sweeps continuously eastward, carrying more water than any other current on Earth. Fueled by strong westerly winds, it circles the planet like a great liquid conveyor belt, linking the Atlantic, Pacific and Indian Oceans in one unbroken circuit. When this current squeezes through the Drake Passage, a gap only about 800 kilometers wide, the water accelerates, colliding with weather systems and underwater ridges to create waves that can tower higher than buildings. For sailors, this is both a challenge and a rite of passage. Ships bound for Antarctica or attempting to round Cape Horn must brave these waters, and even modern vessels can feel dwarfed by the scale of the sea. Accounts from mariners describe waves rising 10 metres or more, rolling endlessly in trains that can stretch for hundreds of kilometres. Unlike coastal seas, where waves are broken by land, the swells of the Southern Ocean travel vast distances unchecked, growing in strength until they meet ships with all their accumulated force. The wind is an equally relentless companion, known as the Roaring Forties, Furious Fifties, and Screaming Sixties. These latitudes are infamous for their gales. The absence of land means there is nothing to slow the atmosphere as it hurtles around the globe, and the result is air in constant motion. In the Drake Passage, these winds funnel through the narrow corridor, whipping the sea into chaos. To stand on deck in such conditions is to feel the raw power of the planet. Salt spray stinging the face, gusts tugging at clothing, the ship pitching and rolling with each massive swell. And yet, there is a rhythm to this wildness. Waves rise, crest, and fall in hypnotic patterns, their long intervals lulling as much as they unsettle. The ocean heaves like a breathing giant, exhaling with each swell, inhaling with each trough. Even in fury there is a kind of order, a cadence that speaks of forces vast and ancient. For those able to find calm within the storm, the motion can become almost meditative, a rocking reminder of Earth's ceaseless pulse. Navigation through these waters has always demanded skill and courage. In the age of sail, rounding Cape Horn was considered the ultimate test of seamanship. Ships were battered for weeks, their sails shredded, their crews exhausted. Many never made it through. Even today, with steel hulls and modern technology, captains plan carefully, studying forecasts and choosing windows between storms. Routes are plotted to ride with the swells rather than against them, and crews prepare for days of rough motion. The passage is not something to be conquered, but something to be endured with respect, a negotiation between human ambition and nature's will. Despite its reputation, the Southern Ocean is not always savage. There are moments when the seas calm, when the surface glitters like steel beneath a pale sun, and the horizon seems infinite in every direction. These lulls are fleeting but memorable, a reminder that storms are not the only story here. The contrast between calm and chaos heightens the drama, making the return of wind and waves all the more powerful. For wildlife, the stormy seas are not an obstacle but a home. Albatrosses, with wingspans reaching over 3 meters, soar effortlessly on the roaring winds, gliding for hours without a single flap. Penguins dive through the waves with ease, their sleek bodies untroubled by the swell. Whales traverse the turbulent waters in search of krill, surfacing in great plumes that rise above the spray. To these creatures, the seas are not stormy but simply alive, and they navigate them with grace that humbles even the most seasoned sailor. The Southern Ocean also plays a crucial role in the health of the planet. The Antarctic circumpolar current helps drive the global conveyor belt of water, redistributing heat and nutrients across the world's seas. It draws up deep, nutrient-rich waters that fuel immense blooms of phytoplankton, which in turn feed the krill that sustain much of the Antarctic ecosystem. These microscopic plants also absorb vast amounts of carbon dioxide, making the Southern Ocean a vital part of Earth's climate system. Its storms, while intimidating to sailors, are integral to the balance of life across the globe. Standing at the edge of the Drake Passage, one cannot help but feel both small and awestruck. The sea stretches endlessly, its surface rising and falling in endless motion, its sound a low roar that never ceases. The winds whip hair and clothing, the salt spray clings to skin, and the horizon merges sea and sky in a restless blur. It is a place that resists taming, a reminder that there are still corners of the earth where nature's will outweighs human control. To cross the stormiest seas is to glimpse the world as it once was, vast, unpredictable, and humbling. For centuries, sailors cursed these waters, prayed through them, and emerged changed by the experience. Today, travellers still speak of the Drake Shake and the Drake Lake, the passage at its worst and at its calmest, stories passed down like rites of initiation. The Southern Ocean, with all its wildness, embodies the raw essence of extremes. Its winds never rest, its currents never stop, and its waves seem endless. And yet, within that restlessness lies a strange serenity, a rhythm that speaks of the planet's heartbeat. To watch those swells roll toward the horizon is to understand that the ocean does not rage against us, but simply moves in its own eternal dance. It is storm and lull, chaos and calm, a living force that shapes both the edges of Antarctica and the imagination of all who dare to sail across its waters. High in the Peruvian Andes, far above the tree line where oxygen thins and glaciers loom, lies a town unlike any other. La Rinconada, perched at more than 5,100 metres above sea level, holds the title of the highest permanent human settlement on Earth. Life here unfolds in conditions so extreme that outsiders often wonder how people endure it at all. Yet for tens of thousands of residents, this icy mountaintop is not just a place to visit, but a place to call home. The thinness of the air is the first challenge. At this altitude, oxygen levels are about half of what they are at sea level. Every breath feels shallow, and simple tasks such as walking, climbing stairs, or carrying groceries can leave newcomers dizzy and breathless. Visitors often suffer from altitude sickness, a mix of headaches, nausea, and fatigue. Long-term residents, however, adapt in remarkable ways. Their bodies develop more red blood cells, lungs work harder, and over generations physiology shifts to cope with the lack of air. It is a daily reminder that human beings are astonishingly adaptable, even when the environment seems determined to push against survival. Yet life in La Rinconada is not defined only by its altitude, but by the glitter buried beneath its mountains. The settlement exists because of gold. Mining is the heartbeat of the town, the reason people settle in such a punishing place. The promise of wealth draws migrants from across Peru and beyond, each hoping to wrest fortune from the frozen earth. Much of the mining here is informal, with thousands of miners working in conditions that are both dangerous and precarious. The economy revolves around gold dust and nuggets, a gleaming lure that sustains the community even as it exacts a heavy price. The system is unique. Many miners work under the cachoeira arrangement, which means they labour for free for a set number of days, and only on specific days are they allowed to take home whatever gold they find. Some walk away empty-handed while others strike lucky, pulling a fortune from the rock. The unpredictability of this system creates both hope and hardship, a gamble with survival that reflects the precariousness of life at the top of the world. Daily living is a constant negotiation with the elements. The temperature rarely climbs above freezing, even in summer, and drops well below zero at night. Roads are muddy in places, icy in others, and the town sprawls unevenly across the mountainside. Houses are built from brick, tin, and wood, clinging to the slopes with a stubbornness that mirrors the determination of their residents. Electricity is patchy, running water scarce, and sanitation limited. The harshness of the environment combines with the challenges of infrastructure to make La Rinconada one of the toughest places on Earth to build a life. Even cooking becomes a battle with physics. Because of the altitude, water boils at around 86 degrees Celsius, far below the 100 degrees that most recipes assume. This means pasta takes much longer to cook, and potatoes, staples of the Andean diet, may remain frustratingly firm unless one adapts. Jokingly, locals might say that up here, dinner takes twice as long and never quite tastes the same. It is a light-hearted reminder that the laws of nature bend differently when you live above 5,000 metres, and that even a pot of boiling water becomes a lesson in science. Despite the hardships, life continues with remarkable vibrancy. Markets bustle with stalls selling vegetables brought up from lower valleys, meat, clothing and tools. Children walk to school, their breath visible in the frigid morning air. Families gather in modest homes, cooking meals and sharing stories, insulating themselves against the cold with companionship. Festivals brighten the calendar, bringing music, dance and bursts of colour to streets otherwise grey with dust and snow. Faith plays a strong role in daily life. with churches and shrines scattered through the settlement, symbols of resilience and hope in a difficult environment. The natural world surrounding La Rinconada is stark but striking. Glaciers crown the mountains above, their icy faces gleaming in the sunlight. Thin alpine grasses cling to the slopes below, and hardy animals such as llamas and alpacas graze on what little vegetation they can find. The sky at this altitude is often a deeper shade of blue, its clarity unmatched, and at night the stars blaze with unusual intensity, the thin air providing little to obscure their light. For all its hardships, the town sits in a setting of undeniable grandeur, a dramatic stage where human determination plays out against a backdrop of snow and stone. Health, however, is a constant concern. The lack of oxygen takes a toll on the body, and many residents suffer from chronic mountain sickness, a condition caused by overproduction of red blood cells. The symptoms include headaches, fatigue, and, in severe cases, life-threatening complications. Combined with limited medical facilities and the hazards of mining, life expectancy is shorter than in most parts of Peru. Yet families stay, bound by opportunity, tradition, and the ties of community. For many, the choice is not between comfort and discomfort, but between possibility and none at all. Visitors often leave La Rinconada with a mix of awe and unease. The altitude challenges every breath, the poverty is visible and the environment is unforgiving. Yet there is also admiration for the people who have carved out lives here, who have made the highest permanent settlement in the world not just a place of survival, but one of endurance and identity. They embody the paradox of extremes, that life can flourish in places that seem entirely inhospitable, and that community can form even where nature resists. La Rinconada is not a picturesque mountain village, nor is it an easy place to live. It is raw, harsh, and shaped by the twin forces of altitude and gold, and yet it is also a place of humanity, where resilience shines in the face of adversity, where laughter and music echo even in thin, cold air. To live here is to know the limits of breath, to measure wealth in both dust and determination, and to discover that even at 5,000 meters above sea level, life insists on finding a way. In the heart of Antarctica, far from the coasts where most research stations cling to their tenuous lifelines of supply ships and aircraft, stands a base so remote that its very existence feels improbable. Concordia Station, built by France and Italy, sits more than 3,200 metres above sea level on a plateau known as Dome Sea. The air is thin, the cold is brutal, and for many months of the year the sun does not rise. To live here is to experience isolation so profound that astronauts often train for space missions by studying the people who endure a season at this station. It is, as some have described with wry humour, like living on another planet, minus the aliens probably. The altitude is the first challenge. Although the elevation is just over 3,000 metres, the thinness of the polar atmosphere makes it feel more like 4,000. Oxygen levels are low, and newcomers find themselves breathless after even small exertions. Headaches, dizziness, and fatigue are common until the body adjusts, and even then sleep is often shallow, disturbed by the lack of oxygen. The air is also exceptionally dry, stripped of moisture by the intense cold, leaving skin cracked and lips perpetually chapped. In such an environment, simply existing demands a measure of resilience. Then there is the temperature. Winter readings often plunge below minus 80 degrees Celsius, cold so intense that steel can become brittle, and exposed skin freezes in moments. At such temperatures, even machinery struggles. Fuel thickens, plastics shatter, and vehicles seize. Going outside requires layers of specialized clothing, and even then, time is limited. The station becomes a world unto itself, a small cluster of buildings on a featureless plain, cut off from the rest of the planet by a barrier of ice, distance, and weather. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of life at Concordia is the darkness. From May until August, the sun does not rise at all. For weeks, the world is bathed in perpetual night, broken only by the soft glow of the moon and the shimmering dance of the aurora australis. Inside, artificial lights attempt to mimic daylight, but the absence of the sun weighs heavily. The body's circadian rhythms lose their anchor, and sleep becomes irregular. People find themselves drifting into odd patterns, some energized at strange hours, others lethargic in the middle of the day. Mood shifts are common, and the smallest frustrations can feel magnified in the endless dark. Psychologists are fascinated by the human response to such extremes. Concordia offers a rare opportunity to study how people cope with isolation, confinement, and the absence of natural light, conditions that mirror what astronauts might face on long missions to Mars. Researchers at the European Space Agency even refer to the base as White Mars, treating its inhabitants as analogues for future explorers. The findings are revealing. Camaraderie is crucial, routine is stabilizing, and humour often becomes the strongest tool for resilience. A shared laugh over a broken coffee machine or a frozen door can ease tensions in ways that no technology can. The crew at Concordia usually numbers only around 12 to 15 people during the long winter, a tiny community cut off from the outside world. Supplies must be stocked in advance, because once the winter closes in, no flights can land and no rescues can be made. Communication with family and friends is limited to emails and occasional phone calls, delayed by bandwidth and weather. Birthdays and holidays are celebrated with what little luxuries can be spared. Perhaps a hidden stash of chocolate, a carefully prepared meal, or a film night projected against a wall. These small rituals take on enormous importance, anchoring life in a routine that keeps monotony at bay. Science is, of course, the reason for Concordia's existence. The station hosts research in glaciology, astronomy, meteorology, and human physiology. The high, dry air and absence of light pollution make it an ideal place for observing the stars. Telescopes scan the heavens in conditions few other locations can match, collecting data about the universe from one of Earth's most pristine vantage points. Ice cores drilled from the plateau contain records of past climates stretching back hundreds of thousands of years, offering insights into Earth's history and its changing future. The research done here is not just academic curiosity. It has global importance, yet the human story is just as compelling. Imagine stepping outside in the middle of winter. The air is so cold it feels like knives against the skin, and the horizon stretches into nothingness, flat and white in every direction. Above, the sky glows with auroras that ripple green and purple across the blackness, silent and ethereal. In those moments, the immensity of isolation becomes clear. There are no villages nearby, no hidden roads, no distant lights. Only the base and the people within it stand between human presence and the vast Antarctic emptiness. Inside, life feels both ordinary and extraordinary. Meals are shared in a communal dining room, work is conducted in labs and offices, and evenings might be spent playing games or reading. Yet the awareness of remoteness never vanishes. The hum of the generators is constant, a reminder that survival depends on machines. Even the air itself is a product of careful control, circulated and heated by systems that must never fail. The fragility of human life is never far from mind, even when laughter fills the halls. For many, the greatest challenge is not the cold or the thin air, but the psychological strain of isolation. Conflicts arise more easily when there are no opportunities to step away. Small annoyances can grow into frustrations when repeated daily. But there is also deep bonding, a sense of kinship forged by enduring extremes together. People leave Concordia with friendships that feel more like family, their shared experiences etched as vividly as the auroras that lit the skies above them. When summer returns and the sun rises once more, the transformation is almost overwhelming. Light floods the landscape, snow sparkles, and the base shakes off its long hibernation. supply flights arrive, bringing fresh food, new crew members, and the long-awaited chance to leave. For those who have endured the winter, the return of daylight is both joyous and bittersweet. They have lived in one of the most isolated places on Earth, in conditions so extreme they might as well have been on another world. And while many are relieved to return to lower altitudes, brighter skies, and the bustle of ordinary life, part of them carries the memory of Concordia's strange serenity forever. Concordia Station stands as a testament to human curiosity and endurance. It is a place where science advances in silence, where camaraderie is forged in darkness, and where the line between Earth and space blurs. In its isolation, it shows both the vulnerability and resilience of humanity. And while it may lack aliens, the truth is that it does not need them. The adventure of living there is already as close to another planet as most of us will ever come. In the far reaches of Siberia lies a city that lives at the mercy of one of the most extraordinary climates on Earth. Yakutsk, capital of the Sakha Republic, experiences temperature swings so vast that they seem almost implausible. In the depths of winter, the thermometer plunges to minus 50 degrees Celsius, while in summer it can climb above 30 degrees. This staggering range of more than 80 degrees makes Yakutsk a place where the very definition of weather extremes is rewritten daily. Winter dominates the calendar. For months on end, the city is locked in a frozen stillness, the Lena River encased in thick ice, and the air sharp enough to freeze eyelashes within minutes. Cars are left running for hours or even days to prevent engines from seizing. Streets echo with the crunch of boots on snow so dry it squeaks underfoot. Frost etches intricate patterns on windows, and pillars of steam rise from every building, ghostly columns that remind passers-by of the warmth being pumped into homes against the brutal cold. Life does not stop, but it slows into rhythms dictated by survival. Schools may close only when the air dips below minus 50, a threshold that would paralyse most cities but is simply another part of winter here. And yet when summer arrives, the transformation is astonishing. The snow vanishes, the ice breaks on the Lena, and greenery floods the city with sudden vibrancy. Flowers bloom in bursts of colour, markets bustle with fresh produce, and temperatures soar into the 30s. People shed heavy coats for t-shirts and gather outdoors in parks and along riverbanks. Children splash in fountains, and barbecues fill the air with smoke. It is as if the city has awakened from a long hibernation into a brief but exuberant season of life. The contrast is so complete that it feels almost like stepping into a different world, and locals joke that in Yakutsk you never quite know which coat to wear, perhaps all of them, just in case. How does a city survive such extremes? Infrastructure here is adapted in ways that would puzzle visitors from more temperate climates. Buildings are not constructed directly on the ground, but elevated on stilts, a design intended to prevent the heat of structures from melting the permafrost beneath. If the frozen soil thaws unevenly, it can shift and buckle, toppling walls and cracking foundations. Elevated construction protects the stability of both ground and building, allowing the city to stand firm despite the fragility of the earth below. Pipes too cannot be buried underground. Instead, networks of insulated conduits run above the surface, carrying hot water and steam through the city. These pipes form a visible lattice across neighbourhoods, a constant reminder that survival here is engineered as much as it is endured. Heating is central, provided not individually, but through a vast communal system that keeps apartments warm even when the outside air is colder than a deep freezer. Without it, life would grind to a halt long before the depths of January. Transportation follows its own peculiar rules. In winter, roads are stable, packed with ice and snow that remain frozen solid. Vehicles, once coaxed into life, can run smoothly on the hardened surfaces. But in the short summer, when the ground softens, the thaw can turn streets into muddy rivers, making travel far more difficult. Seasonal change is not just a matter of clothing but of infrastructure itself, as the entire city shifts to accommodate new challenges every few months. Daily life requires both caution and ingenuity. In winter, people wrap themselves in layers of fur and wool, faces hidden behind scarves to shield against frostbite. Frost settles so quickly that eyelashes and hair often appear dusted white after just minutes outdoors. Yet residents move with ease, accustomed to conditions that would stun outsiders. In summer, the same streets are filled with the hum of bicycles and the chatter of outdoor markets, the vibrancy of a season that must be savoured before the cold returns. Culture in Yakutsk has evolved in step with the climate. The Saka people, native to this region, have long celebrated resilience through traditions, festivals and cuisine adapted to extremes. Winter diets lean on meat and fish preserved in the deep cold, while summer brings fresh produce grown in fleeting but fertile conditions. Festivals mark the return of the sun, the thaw of the river, and the cycles of endurance that define the year. The Isyak festival, held at the solstice, is particularly vibrant, with songs, dances and rituals celebrating renewal and abundance. Psychologically, living in a city with such swings requires flexibility. Residents do not simply endure the extremes, they embrace them. Winter is not just hardship, but also a season of quiet beauty, when frozen rivers gleam under pale sunlight and the air sparkles with frost. Summer is not just relief but celebration, its brevity making every warm day precious. People here learn to find meaning in change itself, to see the cycles as part of identity rather than obstacles. Scientists are drawn to Yakutsk because it offers insights into permafrost, climate change, and human adaptation. The city is a natural laboratory, showing how communities cope with frozen ground that both supports and threatens their existence. As temperatures rise globally, the permafrost around Yakutsk is beginning to thaw, raising questions about the future of the city. Buildings tilt, sinkholes open, and the delicate balance between human engineering and natural forces grows more precarious. In this way, Yakutsk stands not only as a marvel of endurance, but also as a front line in humanity's confrontation with environmental change. The extremes create a landscape of striking beauty. In winter, the Lena River becomes a solid highway of ice, stretching into a horizon of white under skies of crystalline blue. The silence is deep, broken only by the crunch of footsteps or the crack of shifting ice. In summer, the same river flows broad and swift, reflecting the greens of trees and the brilliance of the sun. Wildflowers spread across fields, insects hum in the heat, and the air smells of grass and earth. The shift between these scenes is so radical that it can be hard to believe they belong to the same place. For visitors, Yakutsk can feel like a riddle. How can one city embody both the frozen depths of an Arctic winter and the warmth of a continental summer? How can people cook dinner when water boils at 90 degrees instead of 100, or walk the streets when the air itself seems to burn with cold? Yet for those who live here, these contradictions are not mysteries but daily reality. The extremes are not endured reluctantly. They are embraced as part of what makes the city unique. Yakutsk is a reminder that human beings are remarkably adaptable. It shows that life can flourish, where temperatures swing more wildly than almost anywhere else on Earth. It is a city of frozen eyelashes and summer festivals, of streets lined with steam pipes and markets bursting with colour, of hardship and joy woven together in the fabric of the year. To live here is to carry a wardrobe for two worlds, to cook pasta that may never quite soften, and to wake each day knowing that the weather is not simply background but the very stage on which life plays out. After wandering across deserts that blaze with heat, mountains that scrape the sky, seas that roar with storms, and plains that shimmer with salt, we find ourselves arriving at the quiet end of this journey. It has been a long path through some of Earth's most astonishing extremes, places where the planet seems to bend its own rules, and where life must either adapt with creativity or surrender entirely. Now, as the pace softens and the words settle, it is time to reflect on what these places tell us, not just about geography, but about resilience, wonder, and our connection to the world we share. The first thing to remember is that extremes are not accidents. They are the natural outcomes of Earth's restless nature, the result of tectonic plates colliding, winds spiralling endlessly, oceans shifting with unseen currents, and the tilt of the planet inviting both endless nights and endless days. What feels harsh to us, burning deserts, frozen valleys, or gale-swept coastlines, are simply expressions of forces at work, reminders that Earth is not a machine built for our comfort but a living, dynamic world in constant motion. And yet, what is most striking is not the extremity itself, but the way life responds. Even in the hottest desert, microbial crusts cling stubbornly to the soil, and foxes pad silently through the cool of night. In the deepest ocean trench, where pressure could crush steel, translucent fish glide with untroubled ease. On windswept Antarctic plateaus, scientists laugh together in their shelters, while auroras ripple across the sky. At dizzying heights, human settlements find ways to endure thin air, coaxing potatoes to grow and families to thrive. At every edge of possibility, there is life, fragile, improbable, and astonishingly resourceful. Extremes test us as well. For those who cross stormy seas, climb icy peaks, or live in isolated communities, the experience is not only physical but also deeply human. It teaches patience, ingenuity, and cooperation. It draws people together in ways that calmer environments often do not. To share a meal in the world's highest town, to endure months of darkness with a dozen companions in Antarctica, or to float together on the buoyant waters of a salt lake. These are experiences that remind us that resilience is not only about individual toughness, but about connection, about finding strength in each other. There is also humility to be found in extremes. To stand at the shore of the Southern Ocean, watching swells rise higher than buildings, is to know that the sea does not bow to human command. To feel the cold of Siberia bite so sharply that the air itself stings is to recognize the limits of our comfort. To look out across the Amazon, where more species live in a single hectare than many countries can claim in total, is to realize how little we truly understand about the abundance of life. Extremes remind us that we are small, temporary, and yet also part of the same system that sustains mountains, rivers, and forests. As the journey draws to a close, it is worth remembering that extremes do not exist only in faraway places. They exist in smaller, quieter forms all around us. The sudden summer storm that drenches a city street, the first frost that glitters in autumn light, the strong wind that rattles windows at night. In their own ways, these are echoes of the great forces that sculpt deserts, glaciers, and oceans. To notice them is to be reminded that the extraordinary is not always distant. It can be felt in the everyday rhythms of weather and season. The resilience of Earth is mirrored in the resilience of its people. From miners living above 5,000 meters, to farmers growing rice in rain-soaked hills, to sailors guiding ships through the Drake Passage, humanity has not only endured but found meaning in extremes. Each adaptation, whether building homes on stilts above permafrost or weaving living bridges from tree roots in monsoon-soaked forests, is a testament to creativity. These responses show that survival is not just about resisting hardship, but about weaving hardship into the pattern of life, transforming difficulty into tradition and identity. And still, the extremes are changing. Glaciers retreat, deserts expand, and storms grow more violent as the climate shifts. Some of the places described may look very different in a century. Their balance is unsettled by human influence. This truth carries a quiet responsibility, to recognize that resilience has limits, and that even the most enduring ecosystems can be undone if the scales are tipped too far. The lesson of extremes, then, is not only admiration but also care, to marvel at them, but also to protect them. There is a deep comfort in knowing that Earth has always been a planet of contrasts. Its extremes are not flaws, but features, part of what makes it both fragile and magnificent. In the silence of the Dead Sea, in the roaring winds of Antarctica, in the glow of the polar aurora, the planet shows us its many faces. They are reminders that life is not meant to be uniform, that variety is the essence of resilience, and that beauty often lies at the edges. As the pace slows now, imagine those places fading gently into the distance, the salt flats shining like mirrors under a vast sky, the Amazon canopy whispering with 1,000 unseen wings, the stormy seas rolling on in endless rhythm, the polar night, dark and infinite, and the polar day, glowing without pause. Each one is still there, still enduring, still shaping the planet in its own way. Together they form a mosaic of extremes, each piece different, but together telling the story of Earth's boundless creativity. And so the journey comes to rest. The words soften, the images drift, and what remains is a sense of wonder. Earth is a planet of fierce contrasts, but also of quiet resilience. It is a place where life finds a foothold in the most improbable corners, and where human beings too have learned to adapt, endure, and even flourish. The extremes remind us that survival is possible, that beauty exists even in difficulty, and that in the vast variety of this world there is always hope. As you settle now, let that thought linger, that Earth, in all its storms and silences, in its heat and its ice, in its brilliance and its shadows, continues to turn steadily beneath the stars. And just as it endures, so too can we, finding strength in adaptation and calm in the knowledge that resilience is part of life's design. The journey through extremes may be over, but the quiet awe it leaves behind can stay with you, carrying you gently toward rest.